Buenas, good morning, colleagues. We resume session. We're back in order after recess. We resume with the second reading file. And this morning, the first bill on our agenda is Bill number 51-37 COR. Senator Duenas, you are recognized. All right, it's been pointed out that we do not have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 2 calls for a roll call. We'll wait for a quorum. Third call for a roll call. Clerk, please take roll call.
Senator Barnett, Senator Blas, Senator Brown, Senator Duenas, Senator Fisher, Senator Lujan, Vice Speaker Munoz-Barnes, Senator Parkinson, Senator Perez, Senator Kanata, Senator San Augustine, Senator San Nicolas, Senator Shelton, Senator Tidegui, Speaker Talahi. Madam Speaker, there is no quorum.
Tsusmasi, clerks. We're back from recess. We had recess due to lack of a quorum. If the clerk could please take the roll call.
Senator Barnett. Senator Blas. Senator Brown. Senator Dueñas. Senator Fisher. Senator Lujan. Vice Speaker Muñoz-Barnes. Senator Parkinson. Senator Perez. Senator Canata. Senator San Augustine. Senator Siniclis. Senator Shelton. Senator Taitigui. Speaker Terlahi. Madam Speaker, there is no quorum.
We have 7. We need one more. Here's one more. Yay. Sujus Masi. All right. We are resuming session on the second reading. The first bill on second reading is Bill number 51-37 COR. Senator Dueñas, you are recognized.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, and thank you for recognizing me. At this time, before I move to accept the bill, there is a committee report that has been produced by the committee. There is a bill as amended by the committee that I'm going to be moving. However, because nobody has that bill and hasn't seen it, and I've seen it, and it's substantively different, I suggest we recess at this point and put out the substituted bill so that the senators can follow along. That's what I'll be moving on the floor.
All right, the clerk can have copies passed out.
So,
Sub-bill from the committee.
So we'll take a moment's recess to have that done, please.
All right, we'll take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. Copies have been passed out. We're on bill number 51-37, COR. Senator Dueñas, you have the floor.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. At this time, I move to accept Bill 5137 COR as substituted by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture, introduced by myself, Christopher M. Dueñas. This is an act to add a new subarticle 3 to Article 1 of Chapter 61, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, relative to allowing the construction of accessory dwelling units, ADU, in residential zones. And I'd like to place it in the third reading file as well after being accepted and discussed on it.
The motion to accept the version as substituted by the committee. Is there any objection? Senator Taitigui?
Yeah, point of inquiry, Madam Speaker. Is this on the substituted version uploaded already?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion passes. Senator Dueñas.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. First of all, I'd like to thank you and the committee for producing a committee report on this bill. Madam Speaker, as you know, and many of us know on Guam, there is an affordable housing crisis. And that's not being exaggerated, or I'm not exaggerating when I say that. We know that. There is an affordable housing crisis even on the mainland. I was listening to a news station the other day, watching it on TV. Median home prices in the continental U.S. are $413,000. Madam Speaker, right now, with interest rates and construction costs, we really have no real solution to affordable housing at this point. That's why, Madam Speaker, I believe that Bill 5137 is crucial for our community as a bridge to at least allow our people to construct an additional dwelling unit, either attached or detached, on their personal property in order to do a couple of different things, Madam Speaker. First and foremost, these additional dwelling units are commonly known as mother-in-law homes, nanantata home, grandma-grandpa home. It is an attached or detached unit that basically is a dwelling that is a studio-type, apartment-type setup to where it has typically a kitchen, a restroom, a bedroom, could be a studio or up to one bedroom, generally between 400 and can go as large as 800 square feet. The two reasons for this, or at least two well-known reasons, is, the dignity of being able to stay in a dwelling to where maybe you've outgrown your home and you want your children now to raise a family in your original home, and you and your loved one, you want to still have your privacy, so you stay in this unit where you can cook for yourself, use your own restroom, visit with the family as at your leisure, and be able to have your own place to stay in. Of course, much less substantial than a home. Provides that you don't have to do so much cleaning and maintenance, and it's a dignified living. Sometimes it's the reverse, Madam Speaker. Sometimes it's a family to where a young couple gets married, but they can't afford to rent. Rents are so astronomically high on Guam. And of course, more than likely, starting their new life, they can't afford to build a home yet, particularly now. So sometimes it is that individual couple that will stay, in that dwelling and hopefully eventually graduate to be able to move on in life and realize their own home, or maybe take over their mom and dad's home. Another thing that happens a lot of times in this instance, Madam Speaker, is in the event that, the Lord eventually takes mom and dad and the family owns the home. Say, for example, the young family moves into mom and dad's house and their children live there. But there's still a mortgage on that home. So what they do is, they would like to do is, to be able to rent that accessory dwelling unit so that the rental from that unit can help them to subsidize the mortgage that still exists. Or if a mortgage doesn't exist, it enhances their quality of life because they have additional revenue coming in by being able to rent this accessory dwelling unit. That also sometimes will help alleviate shortage on housing within our community because there's additional rentals inventory that exist under this circumstance. Madam Speaker, originally, the bill as originally introduced contemplated the known regulations of Guam in terms of what our codes call for. It was a relatively simply stated ADU description. We thought that that would suffice. This same bill was introduced, its original version in the 36th Guam Legislature, unfortunately never made it out. So it was reintroduced, of course, in this legislature, and now we're here. I bring this up to say that the substituted version, while I believe, attempts to improve the original bill, it also does a few things that now become quite onerous. And as I read through the substitute bill, I couldn't help but notice the striking resemblance to the legislation or the law that exists in the state of Hawaii. In fact, most of the amendments that I went through and read through are pretty much identical to how the state of Hawaii had adopted their ADU law. Now, I don't have anything against the state of Hawaii. It's a nice place. And I got other codes that I'll be referencing because I'm going to proffer some amendments to the bill as substituted. There are other locations, such as California and others, that are a little bit more friendly, a little bit more liberal. But what I do know is this. The permitting process is never going to be able to, regardless of which bill is adopted, the permitting process is never going to be able to be circumvented. Both bills call for that. The permitting process, as codified now in this law, talks about the procedure that anyone would use going up to Public Works to get a properly built ADU and go through the regulatory process of going through waterworks, going through fire, going through land management, going through da. But we'll codify it. I don't have an issue with that. The one thing I do have an issue with, and I just wanted to talk about it extensively so that maybe my colleagues can get a better idea when this amendment does come up. Madam Speaker, I think that adding this to the conditional use permitting section of the law is not only onerous, but kind of undoes or duplicates and makes a very, very stringent process requirement that someone could do right now. As the Director of Land Management, I sat on the committee that reviews applications, the Application Review Committee. I've sat and listened to those conversations. I have to say, Madam Speaker, I don't think in the time I spent at Land Management, and I know that I attended probably every, if not every, definitely 90% plus meetings as the ex officio representative, the director. And I remember seeing things like medical clinics in Tamuning or other locations which were R1 zones or residential. I remember seeing huge hotels, major development projects. I remember seeing, a lot of it was, and they're represented by attorneys and others that represent, large companies trying to do big projects on Guam. A lot of times they have a requirement under an application that after a certain amount of time, a year, 2 years, 3 years, you must come back before the Land Use Commission in order to be able to update your application, that you're still, you're going to live by all the covenants and requirements. There may be new covenants and requirements that have been added in law or maybe were overlooked. And so you have to come back and you have to keep that application active. I don't think I ever saw a house, a proposed ADU on a house lot come before the application review committee. I don't think I ever saw in my time, or I don't think I ever saw where a person went before the mayor's council and had to get a resolution from the mayor's council in order to be able to build their ADU. As a matter of fact, it's interesting because in this bill, which actually was in my bill as well, there's a requirement for the landowner, the homeowner, those that will put this new additional dwelling unit on, in order to notify the mayor. Hey, mayor, this was a single-family dwelling before. Now I got a non-entata house there. So if you drive by and maybe you see an extra can outside or things like that on trash day, yeah, it's because mom and dad lived there and they got the little can, we got the big can. So, I just got to say that that's a real difficult thing for me to wrap my head around. But I do have an amendment for that, and we can debate that when that time comes. So, yeah, I just really hope, I really, really hope that the discourse on this bill as we go forward centers around this body trying to find solutions to what I will repeat as I close out this opening is an affordable housing crisis on our island. We got a drug epidemic that is a crisis. We have an affordable housing crisis. We have people that are currently living in homes, and we know this to be of 1, 2, sometimes 3 or 4 generations. We don't have a solution for that, Madam Speaker. That's the simple truth. We can give Guam Housing Corporation another $1 million so that they can go out and announce that they have another 500 closing cost grants they can give to first-time home buyers, but it's not going to mean a doggone thing at 7% for a home that even if you built the smallest home on this island right now, a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom of about maybe 800 or 1,000 square feet or 500 square feet would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Something that only a few years ago at 3%. With a couple $100,000, you might have a mortgage payment of $1,350, including your insurance and everything else. Gone are the days. Gone are the days. Hopefully not forever, but gone are the days. We have to do something. And we have to, within the confines of regulation, within the confines of protecting our environment, within the confines of making sure that sewer and whatever utilities are adequate for the facility. If there is a septic system, my gosh, there's technology now. We can even make it better. But I hope that with this bill and other things that we're going to discuss on this floor, I hope that we are part of a solution. Because I believe that's our job. To solve complicated problems. And this is a solution. And I am not against regulation. I am not an individual that says, damn the torpedoes full speed ahead. I don't care about the environment. I am going to be planted on this island. Or maybe in the ocean. the way things are going these days, I think I might want to just go ahead and put them ashes out at sea. But the bottom line is that I will not leave this soil for the rest of my God-given life. Most of my children won't. My wife is committed to that as well. I do not want to drink hanamtaki. I do not want to live in an environment that's destroyed. But I also do not want to see our family members continue to leave this island because we don't do something as a government about giving them basic dignity and affordability to stay on their home. In that spirit, I hope and I pray that the dialogue here will be about solutions and not demagoguery. Sidus Mossing, Madam Speaker.
On the main motion, is there any member who wishes to discuss? Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Sidus Mossing. I rise in support of this bill as substituted by the committee, and I'd like to clear the record on some of the things that have been said, not necessarily here today, but definitely out there in the media during the Committee on Rules meeting and other times. I'm in full support of an ADU, accessory dwelling unit. I made this very clear at the public hearing. I'm also in support of all avenues for additional housing. I'm in support of the crystal clear concerns of members of our community as to the way the bill was when it was originally introduced. I share those concerns. I also share the concerns of residences who, if this bill was passed in its original form, would face changes to their neighborhood, to their adjacent properties without any notice. And I share those concerns. And I share the concerns that Guam might be impacted in the same way that other jurisdictions have been impacted without very clear guidelines. The hearing was held on this bill on April 19, 2023, and during that hearing, the author said, and I quote, "I'd like to go back first and foremost and work with the Guam Association Realtors, assist in drafting the updates to the bill, and then ask our chairwoman for a second hearing," unquote. On April 24th, after the April 19th hearing, 2023, I requested for the amended bill. I received the draft amended bill on April 25, 2024, 1 year after that public hearing. With maybe one or two of the recommended changes by the Guam Association of Realtors, there were 3 changes in the entire amended bill. We even sent a copy of the transcript from the September 2020, to the committee and to the sponsor in September 2023 to assist in moving the bill along. I suggested we look at other states, that we model it after other states, if that would be helpful. I even mentioned to the sponsor personally, Hawaii. But we did not receive an amended bill with addressing the concerns, the majority of the concerns by the Association of Realtors. Instead, there's a press release, May 14, that says, quote, "We've done our job, now it's time for the committee to do theirs," unquote. I do not believe that if we introduce a bill that is not adequate and that's pointed out at a public hearing, that is somebody else's job to make that bill workable, to make that bill fair for the people of Guam, to make that bill productive. And I have, as a committee chair, gone out of my way on many bills, rewritten them entirely, but it's all a matter of staff work and time and priorities. And we did hear from the Department of Land Management on similar ADU bills in the past that there is no urgent need for a bill like this when we already have in place a process to apply for duplexes. If you want to change your apartment into a place into a duplex, you can apply for that. You want to apply for an accessory use building on your property, you can apply for that. I heard the author of the bill pronounce on the media, I'm holding his bill in the committee. Yes, I was, because it needed to be redone. The Guam Association of Realtors, at the time of the hearing, and some of its members came to testify and said very clearly, although they support the intent of the bill, we should revise the first sentence so it's only for a single accessory home. They said that the implementation and operation of this bill's specific sections as written creates a slippery slope, which is highly corruptible and which will serve to defeat the original purpose of the R1 zone. We need to provide more provisions that will set guardrails to assure the ADUs meet the intended purpose and not just another way to make money by creating duplexes in R1 zones. There must be a follow-up section, must put specificity in the legal purpose of the creation of the ADU. Will this legal use be authorized upon application for a building permit backed up by the homeowner's recorded affidavit on the specified use? Is there another method or documentation that assures legal validity which underpins the approval to construct the ADU? Another section defines ADU as a small apartment-like structure. This and subsequent sections should establish size limitations to put validity in the definition of small apartment-like structure. Another section expand to specify that shared utilities may need to be resized and or expanded to accommodate the additional loads, demands created by the ADUs as determined by the requirements of appropriate utility agencies. Or rewrite the section. What happens when at any time, this is from the Guam Association of Realtors testimony again, what happens when at any time before or after the permit is granted or the ADU constructed when the legal purpose is no longer valid and the homeowner wants to lease the ADU? This section specifies that a zone variance or conditional use permit must be obtained. Which is it? A zone variance or a conditional use? If this is how this proposed law intends to deal with rental lease of the ADU, then pick one, exclamation point. The sticky point, what would be the basis for approving or denying a variance or a conditional use application? That's the identical concerns that were raised by Mr. John Duenas as well, engineer. And they very much mirror concerns that were raised by the Department of Land Management's Application Review Committee in September 2021, when we were speaking about ADUs at that time. They wanted to see some limitations on the footprint of the building. Some R1 lots can be as small as 500 square meters. Some R1 lots are unsewered. A minimum lot size might be considered. In an unsewered lot with a detached unit, you would need adequate space for an additional septic tank and a leaching field. The bill is too broad. It covers and affects land use, building code, and property value, appraisals, mortgaging, and refinancing. Septic tank sizes are determined by building occupancy. In an attached situation, the tank size requirement might not be adequate for the additional building square feet footprint. The use could shift. Real property taxes could be affected. But most importantly, for the Department of Land Management at that time, apartment-like occupancy can be presently applied for with a conditional use permit application for a duplex in an R1 lot. And yes, this is a process that gives notice to your neighbors before you bring in higher density to your neighborhood. That's always been the principle behind Guam's laws, and I believe it's fair. So I believe that this bill, as substituted, is not perfect. Again, this bill has not had a second public hearing. We've not had Department of Land Management or anybody else weigh in on the second version because the bill was placed onto the agenda before it was reported out. So I want to thank my staff for working very hard to do what I believe is a bill sponsor's job. We're not going to rewrite the entire bill for you. We will make corrections, yes. We will do our best to incorporate testimony. But when a bill needs to be completely rewritten, that's a sponsor's job. But these concerns that were brought up at the public hearing, most of those are addressed by the substitute version. And other states' concerns as well, including parking requirements. So the bill now requires that there be one off the road, off the street parking. If you're going to build an ADU, that you require you have space for parking. That there are specific yard and setback requirements enforced. That it will not be used as a short-term vacation rental. This is the problem that they had in Hawaii, and I believe Hawaii is very close to Guam because they have the same problem. We can allow ADUs and then they can be rented out for vacation rentals. That's not going to help our housing problem. That's the problem they're having in Hawaii. That's the problem we don't need. It allows access or requires access or easement. These are especially for fire department and safety purposes. And this is to be done in R1 zones. I just want to remind everyone the existing R1 zone law, here, I don't know where it is. I misplaced it. But the existing R1 zone laws, if you want to make a duplex, you have to go through the conditional use permit. Or you rezone your property to R2 and you can make a duplex without going through the conditional use permit. That's just the way that we have run Guam. We have zoned it. We have allowed only certain uses on R1s, and that's because we recognize the importance of different types of neighborhoods, different densities in different areas. I thought at one time, well, anyways, so I support the bill as substituted. I don't believe it's perfect, but I believe it's better than the original version. I believe it takes care of some of these concerns. I believe it takes care of neighbors. I believe it takes care of the concerns from the Guam Association of Realtors. And I believe that this will be fairer for the people of Guam. And that it may, if people are able to build these things, it will bring in some additional housing. Situs Masi.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. On the main motion, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the main motion? Senator Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this measure. I was listening to and reading through the committee reports and the public hearings, and one of the details that really stuck out to me was the testimony of a person named John Santos. Mr. Santos is trying to build an accessory unit for a caretaker who is helping take care of his adult son with disabilities. When I think and read this bill, this is the person that I'm thinking about. What hurdles...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Madam Speaker, what's your point of order?
I'm looking through the committee report, and I'm not seeing any testimony by a John Santos. I believe the speaker's referring to another bill, perhaps?
Senator Parkinson, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. So when I think about regulations and things that we put on, I am all in favor of regulations and putting them on the feds, putting them on the government, putting them on the big businesses. But I always want to give a lot of due deference and consideration to the little guy, to the person trying to put a dwelling for a caretaker taking care of their disabled son. I'm not trying to put barriers to entry for them. And so I think there is a balance to be struck, and I support the core idea of this bill, and how we get there after the amendment process. That's a collaborative effort of this body. But I support the core idea of getting out of the way, reducing the regulation, giving people the freedom to do what they will. Ultimately, I'm not sure what the final version of this bill will come out of this legislative body. But I support the core principles behind it, and I thank the good author of this legislation for proffering it forward. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Senator Parkinson.
Point of
Speaker
order,
Choi?
Mr. Speaker. I apologize to the former speaker and to Mr. Santos. He did testify at that hearing. It's my mistake. I didn't see that right away. But yes, and he did testify, as the former speaker was saying, in wanting to build a unit for his daughter with special needs.
Madam Speaker. On the main motion, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the main motion? Senator San Nicolas, you're recognized.
On the main motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I support my colleague's measure here. He's right. We do have a crisis, a housing crisis, an affordable housing crisis. You go into the stores these days and you look at how they package products. They package them much smaller so that they're more affordable, but they charge you the same price for a lot less. And I went through this part of my life where I was going on a building spree, and pretty much lived in every type of dwelling you could probably imagine. The worst one is under a tent on the mud. And what I can draw from all this is that how you live, where you live, is important. And my goal is always trying to make people live a more dignified, better life, better quality of life than otherwise is presented today. I've lived in a container house, and back then you can buy a 40-foot container for about $4,000 now. Now you can't do that these days. And back then we bought all the materials from Home Depot, and it was a wonderful thing because I had all my kids help out build this container house. And it's not affordable these days. Back when I built my house, we got an interest rate of 3.4%, 3.45%. Today, it's 7, and it's climbing, and I don't think it will ever go back down. Cost of construction's high, but and I was mentioning to my wife, I said, you know, the housing, you know, the type of housing that you can buy today, as opposed to several years ago, it's just, you're going to spend like $300,000-$400,000 for something you could have bought maybe 4 years ago for $300,000 and $235,000, and it's not as pretty of a place as you might imagine. But this bill offers us a way to repackage housing, make it affordable, and allow people to live dignified lives. And I'm for that. And I love the fact that we're looking at giving people more freedom to decide and how to develop their houses and homes and properties the way they see fit, and make it so that they can have that granny flat. And just for giggles, I love to look at Zillow and see all the different types of properties that are around the nation. And I was mentioning to my staff the other day, I said, why don't you guys go up to Dayton, Ohio and buy all the properties? There's 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom houses for $48,000. You know, you can go up there and scoop up all these houses and commercial buildings for a lot less than what you'd buy here on Guam. But it returned, the discussion returned to, that is not our home. That is not where we live. Dayton, Ohio is too far. And this is where we love to live, you know. I purposely try to drive down prices in business because I want people to stay. And I've tried to look for many alternative ways where, you know, we can aid, and so that we don't have to have our people go away. And I hate it when our people go away. I like them to stay here. I like, you know, I like them to stay here and develop our homes. But, you know, this is one of those measures that I think allows that, allows for the dignified living, allows for freedom of choice to do what you want, and in the confines of law, and make things affordable for people who have to live here. And it's a very dignified bill, and I applaud the author. And if you'd be kind, I'd like to be a co-sponsor to any of these bills, whichever, substituted or not. I think both of them, or any one of them, as long as it gives everybody the freedom, allows us to repackage housing and make it affordable for everybody, and so that they can live dignified lives here at home. And so I thank the good author, and I thank the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's kind of fun to see you up there. Thank you.
Senator San Nicolas. On the main motion, is there any other member who wishes to speak on the main motion? On the main motion? Senator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Certainly agree with my colleagues. Not often we say that these days, Mr. Speaker. It always used to be Mr. Speaker, as Senator Frank Santos used to say, Mr. Speakers. You know, it's unfortunate that this discussion on this bill, these many weeks, have led up to where we are today, in a very negative tone and negative view in pulling this bill out of committee. Because I think when we look at the modified version that the committee has put out, I think I'm comfortable with a lot of the language that's in here that could address a lot of the concerns that we all had with regards to this initial proposal. As mentioned by previous speakers, this is nothing new, Mr. Chair. I mean, gosh, almost 35 years ago, I had an uncle and an aunt who had a house in Kaiser, and they actually added on an additional space for my grandfather so that he would have his own private space. He would still be adjacent to the home, could still access the main home, but he had his own space. He had his own kitchen table to sit down. He had his own bed. He had his own bathroom. And yet the design of how this was added to the home is almost unnoticeable. And you notice in Kaiser, there's not a lot of space between homes. The yards are not very big at all. As a matter of fact, if your neighbor was having a conversation and their windows were open, you remember those little louvered windows back in the day? You could actually hear their conversation. But the design of how this was added to the home is almost unnoticeable because it was attached behind the garage. And it really didn't impact a lot of the land space. It wasn't a very large area, but it was a comfortable enough area that my grandfather could have and continue his life with a quality that he could have as sort of independent, but with the support of the family there. I also had a first cousin that also lived in another section of Kaiser that added on an additional room for an uncle of mine, a very beloved uncle that we had, so that my uncle again could have his sort of own independent space in his later years because he needed additional support from other family members, and that's the reality as we know in most of our families as we get older. You know, you want to allow that independence and that support, but yet you want family that's still nearby, that if you need help, they're there. You need dinner cooked, they're there. So this is not a new idea, this concept. I guess the concern, obviously, certainly from me, was just wanting to ensure that these things could be put in a reasonable size, that they could not adversely impact the design of the property, especially when you're dealing with single-family homes on a residential lot. And then also for homes that were in existing developments that really don't have a lot of yard space. I mean, I could put a second home in my backyard. I have a half-acre property. But, you know, I don't know if my neighbors would be too happy with that. I mean, how do we do it in a way where the needs of the family can also be met, but then the adjacent property owners that are also living in very close proximity can also ensure their quality of life is also being met? Because a lot of people bought a home with the idea that they would have a single-family home, that they would have that, and that would be the design of the neighborhood. And then again, Mr. Speaker, we've also seen a considerable amount of illegal construction. I've seen existing developments. I remember Waipaupa when it was first built, because my aunt and uncle actually bought a home up there back in the early 70s. And, you know, I drive around today and I see some modifications of those existing homes. I'm going, oh my gosh, they must have never had a covenant because some of the things that were built and attached, totally incompatible. And the other reality is anyone who owns a home, if you know what the value of your property is, that does matter to people, believe it or not. People do want to know what the value of their home is. They don't necessarily want to know that their value of their home is going to be depreciated as a result of adjacent construction that's not compatible, that does not add to the quality of their neighborhood. And for me, I look at it always, you know, from the perspective of how does this address or enhance our quality of life in our community? I think quality of life is very important. Otherwise, what's all this other stuff? It's not very important to me if it doesn't enhance your quality of life. So obviously, how do we find a happy medium where we can allow for this additional type of construction? Because I've seen it, I've experienced it. I'm talking 30, 40 years ago of having this done, as in the case of my grandfather. So this is not a new concept at all. But doing it in a way that is compatible with the home and compatible with the environment, so it doesn't take away from quality of life. You know, it's not uncommon. You see some house, a single-family home, they got like 5 or 6 cars in the front yard. Oh my gosh, do that many people live? They probably might have to, simply because of the cost of even rentals these days. It's not just competing with the military. You know, you're competing now with even Gura renting homes at the price that they are for residents in our community. The average person, unless you're making, gosh, 6+ figures a year, you're not going to be able to afford to live comfortably or even compete, even in the rental market, with some of the rent prices that are out there. If you're looking at $2,100, $2,200 a month, you're certainly not going to make that being a senator in the Guam Legislature. Your 2 paychecks for the month just got eaten up, assuming you're even making $1,300 or $1,400 a month, which is, you know, what the average take-home pay after retirement and taxes, unless you know, have dependents that you can credit, you know, to have a few extra dollars in your paycheck. So that's the challenge in reality. I don't think any of us argue about that need. I'm more worried about our mass exodus of our people when the time comes the government of Guam can't afford the current budget that it has. That's what worries me. I remember, Mr. Speaker, when the Guam shipyard closed down, I know because my dad was a rigger foreman, Shop 72. And there were a lot of families as a result, unfortunately, that didn't have the ability to retire at the time, that were skilled in their profession, and they had a very specialized profession that they had, and we had such a mass exodus. Some of them, as we know, families that moved off island, we know will never, ever move back to Guam. And when I see a long-term resident that has lived off island, either they've been in the military, they've had their work career off island, come back, I'm really appreciative because I'm like, wow, I'm glad you came home. We need more of you here. But in most cases, I have my Chamorro cousins, more Chamorro than me, that I know will never live on Guam, never move back to Guam, many who've never even been to Guam. And for those of us that appreciate living here, that choose to continue to live here, I think we recognize the special, unique life that we have here, especially that's connected to our history, to our ancestry, that we can appreciate. So I don't argue the importance of needing to provide additional support where families may need it, be it for their children, be it for their elderly members that they have that need that help, because it's not always financial. The need is personal. They need, because of their age, because of their medical condition, need that additional support. But like I said, we want to see them also have that dignity. So there's no argument there. There's no conflict there. And it's unfortunate so much negative energy has been thrown to this because of the view that, oh, they're members of us here, members of the committee that don't want to see this bill meet the light of day or be here on the floor. And yet I look at the amendments versus the original version of the bill that I would not have voted for, that now that I look, I go, okay, there's some protections put in here. There's protections put in here to ensure quality of life, and that requirements, setback requirements in particular, can be met because, like I said, some of these housing developments, and Hawaii in particular, goodness, you look at some of the housing developments that have come up from the time I was living there to where we are today. I mean, it seems like literal feet between some of these houses, and they cost how much, you know? And there's literally hardly much walking space between one house to the other because they're maximizing as much as they possibly can the land space. It's incredibly, you know, Guam's expensive. I have a cousin that's in real estate there, incredibly expensive. I mean, unless you're almost walking around with $1 million, good luck trying to find a decent, and we're talking basic, you know, 3-bedroom, maybe 2-bath if you're lucky residential home there. So there's no argument. I mean, I'm comfortable looking at this, assuming that the proper permitting requirements are being met, even if it is down the road for whatever reason allowed as a rental unit, that there's protections in place to even ensure that there's a parking space so we don't overcrowd public easement with vehicles, and ensuring that there's a specific area of construction, footprint of construction that can't be exceeded, so we don't have these inconsistencies with regards to single-family homes having additions added onto them, or even allow, you know, building up perhaps, or building another story that can accommodate this particular construction where it doesn't impact the physical impact of the home. So, you know what, when you allow a bill to go through the process, and I appreciate the presentation of the author, and also of the speaker as the chair of the committee, and in relaying the circumstances of what led to the issues and the timing. You know, here we are today. I hope in the future we can move forward in a much better process that doesn't allow the back and forth that has occurred, because I think all the negative energy at the end of the day really doesn't move us forward very much. But overall, Mr. Speaker, I support the bill. I support the modifications that have been made by the chair and the committee to put protections in place so that we can accommodate both needs. Accommodate the need of the family for additional living space, and then also, again, ensuring that there's some sort of organization to this process so that it's not misused or abused, and that these residential lots can have the essential design and intention of how they were created and why they were created, why the setback requirements were put in place, so that people at the end of the day can also have quality of life within their own neighborhood, which, as I said, to me is always a priority. So with that, Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to comment on this bill.
Si Dulasmasi, Senator Brown. On the main motion, is there anyone else on the main motion? Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do appreciate the hard work that the Speaker and her staff put into this bill. It was originally introduced as a two-pager, probably adopted from previous terms, and you know, I think it really helps to see that it's good to see a lot of the you know, the safeguards are put in place to ensure that our community is protected. And I know with the affordable housing crisis that we have, it's, you know, really the issue is what's happening with the speculation that's occurring right now. I know it's important to increase supply, but just by increasing supply is not going to address the root of the problem. We need to create a localized affordable housing market, not a market that is, because as you know, Guam's market is international. You know, we can't compete against the overseas allowance at $2,500 or even upwards of $4,000 when our salaries are almost, are not doesn't match the increase in how much the military can afford. And so, you know, I think at least this protects our community, as the bill as substituted does protect our community, because it puts these safeguards in place. You know, it's unfortunate that, yeah, it was pulled out of committee, but, you know, I'm thankful that the Speaker put together some really good safeguards. The concern that I have, though, is with the increased density. And so I know there's going to be debate about that in a coming bill, but yeah, I just want to make sure that our environment is protected. When we increase density of development over our aquifer, we have to be very careful that we're not going to irreparably harm one of the most precious resources that we have, which is our drinking water, and in which really determines how we can exist on this island. So again, I think it's going to increase supply. It will help our local families, but in the long run, there's no protection as far as ensuring that what is created from this bill is going to stay affordable, especially if we have, you know, speculation in the speculative market that can also drive really, it would really create affordable housing as a moving target as it is today. Yeah, so again, you know, I'm appreciative of the change, but it doesn't solve the root of the problem. Masi.
Masi, Senator Paris. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Taitigui, you're recognized.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and to my colleagues, good morning. You know, I had so much notes on the first original bill, the two-pagers with all the issues and concerns that I had on. And now having this one in front of us, it wipes out the majority of my the notes that I had. And I, too, like to thank the Speaker for addressing this. And especially this has been like almost a year that it had not been addressed. And now all of a sudden we're coming into this and this bill today that's 9 pages long, I think, which, you know, should have been done a year ago. But nonetheless, I mean, I'm not sure if that round table ever did happen. So, you know, I'm not sure if it did. May I ask the Speaker if that round table ever happened?
Speaker, do you yield to the question?
If you're referring to a second hearing, no, because there was no revised bill to have a second hearing on until April 2024.
Masi. Senator Taitigui, are you okay with that?
Thank you. And so my next question, too, would be either to the author or to the Speaker. Did the, I mean, because they were the ones that came out and was, you know, there to support Well, not really. They came out and did not support the bill, the original bill. Actually, they had some concerns. They supported the intent. So my question next is, has the Guam Realtors Association had an opportunity to look at this bill and hear any comments? So either the author or the speaker, it doesn't matter.
Would the author yield to the question?
Susan Masi, I'd love to yield to that question, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I sent the substitute version to them as soon as it came out. They have reviewed it, and the expanded answer to that question is, the reason why the subsequent meetings I had with GAR was, and we communicated with land management, that the code of Guam, we're codifying a lot of the code of Guam in this bill, which is fine. We're codifying it for ADUs. But setbacks are not an issue because you cannot get a permit for any use that you're applying for without the proper setbacks. Those are in our code, cannot be violated. So the bottom line is I do appreciate the work as well, the codification of what is in our code for ADUs. But absolutely, and for anyone who would like to speak to GAR, they're actually out in the gallery there. And that's why John Duenas sent an email to everyone that the 3 changes that I made in the bill, and I also submitted another substitute to the committee, that the 3 changes that I made addressed what their concerns were. We talked about what the Guam Association, or what the code calls for. And you will note, Mr. Chairman, and to the proffer of the question, there was no testimony from Department of Land Management, even though they requested for this particular bill. There was concurrence that our code is adequate, and the speaker's right.
Thank you
That
for
if you're going to go to a larger unit, that the conditional use then would be applied.
Okay.
But
well,
the
thank
ADU,
you, Senator.
yeah, so if
You
you'd
know,
like
you
to
can
speak to them, they're out of the
later
gallery.
on, but I appreciate that. And
Si
yes, I'm
Senator
aware-
Duenas. Senator Tydegui, you have the floor.
I am aware GAR is there, but you know this original bill was introduced in the 36th Guam Legislature by Senator Ada, taken in now and reintroduced in this legislature. And it's obvious that it needed a lot more work than what was originally introduced. And my biggest concern was on page 2, was regarding existing septic tank sizes are not adequate for the additional footprint. So when this was added in, I was quite concerned because here you're adding more volume, more density of any type of contaminants or into the ground by. It's not just the square footage, but the density of allowing more people in one area. So I just want to make sure that these units, these attached units, we're not going to have 2 or 3 families living in there or 6 different families living in there. And, they say that it has to be approved by the Department of Land Management. It's unfortunately, they didn't come by and testify. As Senator Duenas mentioned, they didn't provide any testimony. But we have them down here as the agency first to determine what's the meaning of unforeseeable hardship circumstances, and then also here that to confirm by the Director of Department of Land Management for the purpose of this section, designated authorized representative means a person or persons designated by the property owner or owners to the Department of Land Management who are responsible for managing the property. So I guess this is another mechanism to ensure, well, I'm hoping this is, if that's the intent, that who's ever going to live in these dwellings, that they register with the Department of Land Management. So I just want to clarify that. Is that the intent of this section? So I guess it's either the author or the speaker, because the speaker did a lot of work on this legislation to clarify it. But so my question too is on page 2, section 4.
Senator Tydegui, who are you addressing the question to?
Either or, the author or the speaker who did some work on it. So it says that Department of Land, the hardship circumstances will be determined by the Department of Land Management in the event somebody has to leave or they were only in the dwelling for a short time, because there is Another one under line 6, or number 6 on page 3, talking about at least 6 months. It cannot be used for a bed and breakfast or short-term vacation. And it has the Department of Land Management for the purpose of this section. Designated authorized representatives means a person or person designated to the property owner. So does that mean that the individuals that are in this unit need to be registered with the Department of Land Management, or does that have to do later on with the mayor's office?
Thank you, Senator Tydegui. Would the speaker or the author yield to the question?
So is it Department of Land Management that has to be notified on the occupancy of the unit?
Speaker Terlahi, would you yield to the question?
Or is it under another section where it talks about the mayors? Of course, hardship circumstances is in there too to determine. So if they're going to determine that an individual is in
Are you
there.
just talking about on page 3, where it says subject to written confirmation by the Director of Land Management?
Right, exactly. But it talks about, except in unforeseen hardship circumstances, including but not limited to active military deployment or serious illness to prevent continued occupancy of the primary dwelling unit. So who is going to determine that hardship in the event an individual is no longer occupying a unit and has only been there for like maybe a month?
According to this section, if I would yield to that question, yeah, it would be,
Madam Speaker.
it would be it's a giving notice to the Department of Land Management. So this is one of the things about the original bill. The intent said it was for family members, and yet in the revised bill, when it came back, it's for rental for anybody. So we tried to resolve that by saying that that the accessory dwelling units are subject to the following conditions, and so we put in the family conditions as was put into the intent of the original bill, and they shall occupy except in these circumstances. They give confirmation, or they just notify Department of Land Management, and then there's another provision in here that for those circumstances that allows for long-term rental of the units.
Okay.
Speaker Terlahi. Senator Tydegui, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's very important. I think it's on line 7, reporting requirements to the municipality. Upon completion of an ADU, the head of household shall inform the mayor of the affected municipality. This is to facilitate better governance through safety, community planning through village population data tracking, zoning, and compliance. I think this is a very good idea too as well. We create zoning laws. These laws are created and put in place to allow our communities to plan, to decide whether they want to live in this area. I know some condominiums, they do not allow, through the homeowner association, they do not allow bed and breakfast, or they do not allow Airbnb. This is something that, people don't, the reason why is because you have people coming and going. You really don't know who's in that resident all the time. So we were just talking about the Castle Doctrine bill. Can you imagine, someone coming onto a property or even trying to cross over to get to their unit? We don't even know who lives there. And this is why zonings are put in place. So communities can plan, so people can decide whether they want to live in an area where there's an attached duplex area where people can just come and go and in a unit every, this says at least 6 months, and then change over to someone else. I hope people become better neighbors with each other to know who's staying next to you, who's to the right or to the left. I mean, back in the day, that was a given. As soon as somebody moved in, you were there helping them to move in. You were there to assist them in any way. And they watch after each other. They watch after each other's homes when they're gone off island. That was back in the day when we still were able to leave our doors open without, locking it, or our windows open, allow the fresh air to come in so we don't have to worry about someone, invading our place. So it's just, a lot of work was done into this to change a lot of those concerns, and I'm glad for this. I just wish that it had gone through the process. I mean, it's kind of like halfway through the process. At least the committee report came out. And it's online for everyone to see. And based on, our session agenda, people have a little bit more time to review this. So other than that, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity and to have my questions answered. I appreciate that, because I'm pretty sure there are other people out there who, have a bunch of questions as well, because this is going to affect their neighborhood. This will affect their neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Taitagui. On the main motion, Senator Fisher, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to follow up on what my friend Senator Taitagui was speaking about as to Section 4. And I guess this is a question which would go to the author of the bill. 4 says the property owner or owners or persons, but it's in front of us, we all know what it says. Does she agree that this is a covenant running with the land?
Senator Fisher, would you clarify who the question is directed to?
Oh, yes. I think, is the author not Speaker Terlahi? No, it's Chris.
Senator Duenas' bill.
Okay, but this is as...
Point of information.
Senator Duenas, you're recognized.
Yeah, I believe the senator is discussing the substituted version, but yes, I am the author of the bill, but if the senator would, because I didn't put that in, so I really don't know the intent, so if maybe he can redirect the question to Madam Speaker, who substituted the bill. Sidus Masi.
Sidus Masi, Senator Duenas.
That's correct.
Madam Speaker, do you yield to the question?
Shall I repeat the question?
Sure, Senator Fisher. Please restate the question.
Yes. Does Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, does Madam Speaker agree that Section 4 is a covenant, a promise, running with the land?
Speaker Terlahi.
I think the covenants running with the land is addressed in subsection 7. There's a list there that says that that should be covenants that should run with the land. For example, I guess the intent is that if you build an ADU today and you say it's an ADU, that you're not in turn going to turn it into a condominium or some other a duplex or whatever, and that will run with the land until you change that. Yes, so it's just to make, when you promise that to land management, yes. So those are listed in section 7. They don't include subsection 4.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. Senator Fisher, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you for the answer. A covenant running with the land is a promise made for the use. It's a burden on the land that it's irrelevant or immaterial who owns the property. Whoever you sell it to, now or the next century, must abide by that very same promise. It runs with the land. Wherever the land goes, so does the promise. Here, we say the property owner or owners or persons who are related by blood, marriage, or adoption. Notice that this excludes what we sometimes refer to as common law relationships, or adoption to the property owners or designated authorized representative shall occupy the primary dwelling. There's a number of questions which arise. If an owner, say three spaces down in the chain, violates the covenant, what will happen to the accessory dwelling unit? And I would submit that question to Speaker Terlahi.
Sido Masi, Senator Fisher. Speaker Terlahi, do you yield to
Yes,
the
can you
question?
please specify which section we're talking about?
Senator Fisher, please restate the question and specify which section it
Yes,
applies.
yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm on page 2 of the bill.
Okay. Well, we just talked about the covenants are not on page 2. The covenants are on page 3 under subsection 7.
Well, okay, Mr. Speaker, may I address that?
Proceed, Senator Fisher.
Thank you. I think we have agreed that while she is quite correct, there is a list of covenants. Section 4 establishes an additional covenant since it is a requirement and a burden on the land. My question then is this. Under 61-141, as beginning on line 23 of page 2, what is the result if an individual, as I said, 2, 3, 4 spaces down in the chain of title, violates this? Is the ADU then not habitable? I mean, what's the consequence of violating this?
Speaker Terlahi, do you yield to the question?
Subsection 4 says that the property owners shall occupy the main unit on the property, and that they are...
Or, there's an or.
Yes. Or designated authorized representative shall occupy the main unit.
Or.
Senator Fisher, Speaker Terlahi has the floor at the moment. Speaker Terlahi, please proceed.
Yes, or the dwelling unit. Yes, so I don't understand the question. Can you just repeat it? What is the question?
Okay. Yes, yes, Mr. Speaker, if you like, I'll repeat the question. 2 to 3 owners down in the chain, or even the original owner, what is the effect of violating Section 4? In other words, the person who is in my ADU is not related to me, I'm not married to her, I haven't adopted her or him, and just somebody moved into the unit that violates Section 4. What is the result?
I will yield to that.
Speaker Terlahi?
Yes. So these ADUs are being granted conditional use based on, I'm the owner of the property, I'm either going to stay in the main property or I'm going to stay in the smaller unit. So sometimes they switch. That's fine. But if I'm going to rent out both units, not stay in either, then it's not an accessory dwelling to my living there. It's pretty much a duplex up in the market. It's that that intent. And you want to know what will be the punishment of them? I don't necessarily know. It's going to be the same as violation of any other covenant that's made by anybody on Guam who goes through the Department of Land Management or the Guam Land Use Commission. And we've seen that they are very hard to enforce. So this is one of the risks that we take. They're hard to enforce. When you go in and you promise Guam GLUC, yes, we're going to abide by these conditions, we found that they do not. So we did pass a law not too long ago to give them the ability to completely deny renewals of conditional use approvals if they are not complying with the conditions. So this is a condition, as one of the previous speakers said, that's being laid out in this bill and this law, if it becomes law, that this is for ADUs. This is not for converting the properties into R2s. This is not going to be built for creating duplexes. It's for creating ADUs and this is the intent. And I believe Department of Land Management or the GLUC is going to have to enforce it the way they enforce all the other conditions under the zoning law. Similar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Fisher, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll move on from that. Honest to God, I listened to what was just said, and I have no idea what any of it meant. The question was quite simple. What happens if you violate it? And I'm going to move on from that because we're not going to get an answer to that. There's two questions which immediately come to mind. This is almost like a modern-day serf relationship. You are forced to live in a piece of property. I've never seen a law like that before that requires an individual to occupy a space in order to avail or enjoy a statutory right. It's peculiar. The other observation I have is where I limit the use of somebody's property, in mine, yours, anybody's, to a particular use like this, I am taking from them the ability to enjoy the property as they would like. I think that might present a takings clause problem under the Constitution and the Organic Act. I just think that this thing is replete with problems. As a preliminary matter, it appears that none of us really understand what it is we are saying in this section. Yeah, and as Senator Teitigwe observes, I don't either.
Speaker Terlai, point of information.
Yes, many of these provisions are adequately enforced in other jurisdictions, including Hawaii, and this is the way that they separate an ADU, as the author of the bill says we intend here, from other types of developments. Simple as that. It's very easy to read. It says, if you're building an ADU, meaning you want an accessory use on your property to your living, then you have to live there. And it's not a serf because it's enforced in other jurisdictions. And if you want to rent out both properties, then you need to just do something else. It's very simple. And that's how we enforce our zoning laws. If you want to turn it into something else, then you need to do something else. You can't do that under the ADU law. Under the ADU law, you're going to build an accessory dwelling unit. You're going to use it as an accessory dwelling unit. And when you change, you must change from approvals under ADU and get approvals under duplex or R2 multi-purpose rental units. Something else, whatever you intend.
Madam Speaker, on the point of information. Senator Fisher, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the point of information. I would be very happy to receive citations to the other district or districts from which Section 4 was derived. I'm fairly certain to say that if that is the case, and Section 4 is in Hawaii or Utah or whoever's code, that there has been significant litigation regarding that, and perhaps the Speaker could provide the citation for where she got Section 4, as well as, of course I can do my own research, but I'd be very interested in seeing how the courts in these various jurisdictions have dealt with Section 4. I think my observation is that this is, at best, problematic. Thank you, sir.
Senator Fisher, on the main motion. Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Zemanana Situus, to my colleagues and to the listening audience. As I look at this bill, I wanted to share that I shared the same sentiments as the good author on Bill 51-37. And just as I absorb this legislation, proposed legislation, I know that it was literally substituted and a lot of the sections were provided, and I'm going over that. So let me, for myself and for the listening audience, I guess the intent of this by the good senator from Agania, right? Senator Chris? Where are you from? Sinahanya Tamuning, is to provide homeowners with the ability to construct a residential accessory dwelling unit, which is an ADU, on the same lot as their single-family home in residential R1 zones. This provides an affordable housing option for adult relatives to live independently close to the occupants of the main home, addressing the lack of sufficient senior housing here on our island. And then who it affects, of course, it affects homeowners in R1 zones. What does the bill allow for? The bill allows homeowners to construct ADUs, which are small secondary housing units on the same lot as their single-family homes. The effective date, I guess, when will it be done, is upon enactment. And this is to provide an affordable alternative to assist living and other senior housing options, addressing the needs of Guam aging population by allowing adult relatives to live independently while being close to the main home. And of course, the ADUs must also comply with wastewater environmental impact requirements as stated by the Guam's administrative rules and regulations, right? Which is both Guam law and federal law that we abide to. When I look at the amended version, and I just wanted to ask so that I get some clarity, and I don't think it was by the sponsor, I think it was by the committee, was on item 4. The property owner or owners of persons who are related by blood, marriage, or adoption to the property owners or designated authorized representatives shall occupy primary dwelling units or accessory dwelling units except in unforeseen hardship circumstances, including but not limited to active military deployment or serious illness that prevent the continued occupancy of the primary dwelling unit or the accessory dwelling unit, subject to written confirmation by the Director of Department of Land Management. For the purposes of this section, designated authorized representative means the person or persons designated by the property owner or owners to the Department of Land Management who are responsible of managing the property. I just wanted to get clarity on how this provision on item 4 was entertained and how it was included in this. If there was any specific other action as it relates, because it's not on the original bill. And you know, Guam is a little bit different, right, Mr. Speaker? We're unique as it relates to family, relationships of family, and I can literally stand up here and say that for me, extended family for me are even those that are not blood related to us, not in the military, not a designated representative. We have extended family members because it was provided through love, through relationships, through kinships from those not even of our own blood. And anyone who knows my family, the Munya family, we've adopted brothers and sisters from Micronesia. We have literally over 40 brothers and sisters, and people laugh at me, right, and saying, oh, you're related to the whole island of Guam. And I say, yeah, you know, we've just been blessed by that. And I just wanted to make sure to see, because, you know, it says by blood, marriage, or adoption of the property owners. I have family members who we consider, they're not blood, they're not adopted, but they're still our brothers and sisters at heart. So I just asking and seeing, because, like I said, my brothers and sisters of Micronesia have been a part of our family for the last 5 decades, or 6 decades, because I'm over that bracket now. And for all the years that I've known, yeah, I'm aging myself, Senator, but just wanted to see how that came about, because I really didn't want it to take away the definition of family, because to me, Guam is very special and unique and reared and poksai. I don't know if I have to put something like that in to work on it. It may not be big to you guys or to the committee who substituted this or the author, but it really is big for me. So if the good author who substituted this can just tell me where she got the verbiage.
Speaker Terlahi, would you yield to the request
I
for
would
clarification?
love to yield to that question, thank you. And it's
Masi.
very similar to the previous question. Why are we saying that the owners of the property or their family or their, and this provision's very clear, designated authorized representative means the person designated who is responsible for managing the property, and will reply to DLM as the manager of this property. It can be a relative or your designated authorized representative. We are requiring one of those people to live in this house in order to call it an accessory dwelling unit to that property owner. Because if we were just going, and that's really it. So you can allow your Poksai family to be your designated dwelling unit representative. That's easy. I'm not sure if that's the question, that's an easy one. Then they're either one of these or they're your designated authorized representative. It's just whoever's going to live in that house be designated by you to the Department of Land Management so they know who's managing this ADU, this accessory dwelling unit.
Madam Speaker. Vice Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, if I may, and after hearing that, I just literally didn't take a liking to that because I don't have to designate anyone to be my authorized representative to do what they want to do in that house and have to report to the Department of Land Management. If I have a family member that I think is blood, my brother Richard, my sister Lindsay, who stayed in my mom and dad's house and even the extension thereof, after my parents died, it's unfortunate she was involved in a car accident and passed away, but they lived with us. We didn't have to tell them to go to land management to report it. And I'm just saying, maybe, I don't know, maybe be a little bit more kinder and add the dwelling of.
Point of information,
Speaker
Mr. Speaker,
Terlahi, on a point of
I appreciate the
information.
concerns of the Vice Speaker, but this is the whole point. It's like if they are living in your house, you do not need to designate it an ADU. You want to build an additional room, you just get the permits for that, and you build an additional room. They live in your house. But if you want to build an accessory dwelling unit, you need to follow Guam law to build an accessory dwelling unit. You need to comply. That's increasing density. It's like a duplex, but with some variations to that. And for duplexes, you have to go through all this process. You have to have a lease. They have to know who's in the house. Who are they going to contact for that, or who's managing that property? Who's the owner? Who's the manager? And that's all this does, is say that DLM will know who is managing the property, including the ADU. That's very easy. That's what we do with landlords. That's what we do with property owners. In fact, they are recorded at land management. So this is because we're allowing that additional unit that is not an additional room. They're not living in your house. That's the whole point of the bill. That information also, there's somebody who can answer to Department of Land Management for issues there.
Well,
Madam Speaker, on the point of information, Vice Speaker, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, even after hearing that, I don't take that to be as complimentary, and that would fulfill. My question was, how did it come into play, and how was this thing? Was it cited in any other section and all that? For me, I don't think it's respectful enough. And at this time, I'd like to move to delete this portion of Section 4. Just because I think that there are already provisions in place that may allow for the reporting requirements on how you apply for a home. How do you get the permits? You literally have to go through, as the main owner, you have to go and get the permits through Public Works, EPA, just everything. You have to do the whole shebang with the government of Guam. And that's why we started a one-stop center, so that we can have the opportunity for all the government agencies there. And never once in all years of owning my house that I had to look at this, even on the extension, had to look at this provision. And I think that it's just not respectful enough for me, and I move to delete it.
Vice Speaker, I'm sorry, was there a motion for an amendment to delete a
I
section?
said I move to delete Section 4 of that provision, yes, sir, on the substituted version. If you want to save a tree or you want it written out, it's just to delete that item 4.
Vice Speaker, could you clarify, is it section 4 or subsection 4?
I'm sorry. On section 61141 on page 2, line 23, starting from line 23 all the way up to line 7 of page 3. Thank you.
Cito Espansi, Vice Speaker, on the amendment to delete subsection 4. Speaker Terlai, you're recognized.
With all due respect, as the issue seems to be respect, with all due respect to the concerns, without this provision, it's not an ADU, it's a multi-unit dwelling. It should be an R2 zone. It means anybody can stay in that house or in the accessory dwelling unit, and we're just renting them out as 2 separate units. That's an R2 in an R1 zone. Clear and simple. So that was my concern with the bill as amended by the sponsor sent to my committee. I didn't think it really addressed the concerns of the Guam Association of Realtors when they said, purpose of the bill's noble. The implementation and operation of its specific section as written creates a slippery slope which is highly corruptible and which will serve to defeat the original purpose of the R1 zone. An R1 zone. You want an R2 zone? Make it an R2. Don't come in here with an accessory dwelling unit bill and say, we're going to actually allow R2s. Let's consider that bill if that's the bill you want. But amending this bill because of some false concerns, this section 4 really does hardly anything except say, if it's an accessory dwelling unit, then the owner of the property is in one of those dwelling units. They're either in the original house or the smaller accessory. Because if it's not that situation that the author proclaims we're trying to address here, take care of family members, anybody, you can actually rent it out to anyone. But you are going to be responsible because it's accessory to your house. It has not had its own building permit, its own separate lot with its own separate infrastructure requirements. It has not had any of those things required in a multi-rental unit. That's what the effect of deleting Section 4 will be. And I'd like a 1-minute recess, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let's take a 1-minute recess. Sudos Masi, we're back for recess. We're actually going to recess till 2 o'clock for lunch. We'll see you at 2. Sudos Masi.